You're listening to Finding Your Future in Food Systems.
Fantastic. Welcome to NAFSN. I am Natalie Cruz, one of the co-directors of NAFSN. I am also a writer, educator, and food systems professional who specializes in decolonized food work. I'm joining you this evening from New York City. The North American Food Systems Network is a professional association of people working to strengthen local and regional food systems. We encourage you to join NAFSN if you value a diverse, well-informed, place-based workforce at the helm of this critical change work. We also want to acknowledge this. Many of the organizations and agencies that do the work of strengthening their local food systems, including farmers, are currently under political duress. Funding cuts to sustainable agriculture and food access programs threaten our profession and America's overall food security. It is the determination that we continue to host the series so that more and more people understand how essential these roles are to the vitality of local economies, the health of communities, and the responsible care of Earth's natural resources. Now, I'd like to introduce you to the host of this episode, Jeffrey Hsu, and to our visiting co-host, Sema Nusila.
Thanks, Natalie, and thank you all for joining us for the fourth and final episode of the 9th season of Finding Your Future in Food Systems. For those of you tuning in for the first time, this is a series produced and hosted by students to help emerging professionals and others navigate the wide range of quickly evolving career opportunities in community food systems work. We're so very fortunate today to be hosting with a live watch party at Cornell University's campus in partnership with Manners Cornell, funded by the Student Activities Funding Commission. My name is Jeffrey, and I'm a third-year food science and global development major at Cornell University and a student staff member for NAFSN. We are joined today by Manners Chapter President, Sema.
Good evening, all. My name is Letuna Sema Nusila, but Sema for short. I'm a third-year agricultural sciences student at Cornell University, and I'm the current president for Manners Cornell. It's great to be here with Kim, Natalie, our speakers, and everyone in attendance. It is also very encouraging that more than 25 people are registered. My bad. More than 170 people. I was off by a lot there, but more than 170 people have registered for this event. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared with all registrants later this week by email.
Before we get started, we'd like to sincerely thank the season series sponsor, FARMWISE, an innovative statewide value chain development initiative at Indiana University. We'd also like to acknowledge and appreciate our full-year sponsors, Grapevine Local Food Marketing, Roots of Change, Cliff Family Foundation, and Harrisdale Homestead.
It's great to see so many people in attendance, and we encourage you to keep your video on if you choose. For our speakers to have a better understanding of who is present with us today, please add to the chat your name, location, and areas of interest in food systems work. If you are currently affiliated with a food systems organization, institution, or agency, please add that as well. NAFSN is all about professional networking, so please take advantage of this great opportunity to meet and connect with each other through the chat today. Throughout the webinar, we'd also like to ask you to write questions for our guests, speakers in the chat. Jeffrey will curate these questions for you during a Q&A with each speaker.
NAFSN is headquartered in Ithaca, New York, which is located on the traditional homelands of the Gaetuna of the Cayuga Nation. We have the pleasure of introducing three guest speakers with us today. We will begin our conversations with Heather Tallman from our season sponsor, FARMWISE. We will continue our conversation with Dr. Ariel Rivers from the National Association of Conservation Districts, and we will wrap up our conversation with Thomas Smith from the Kansas City Food Hub. It is a pleasure to meet you all, and we are super excited to get started. And please, as a reminder, put any questions that you may have for our guest speakers in the chat, and we will curate them for you after each speaker presents.
Dr. Tallman is a statewide value chain coordinator for FARMWISE Indiana. Heather received her education from Indiana University's Bloomington campus and has since dedicated over 15 years of her career to educating consumers on how their food gets to their tables and working with farmers on how best to share their farm and small business stories. She's devoted to bringing more Indiana food to all, from our most vulnerable populations to Hoosier College students. Without further ado, please take it away, Heather.
Hi. Well, thank you for having me. I am currently in Indiana where it's pretty snowy, but I think a lot of us are used to that this time of year. So it's a good time to catch up and convene. And right now, what I'm doing a lot of is convening with farmers and buyers. And why I'm doing that is because I spent a lot of my career at this point working in the middle supply chain. But when I began working in food systems, I could not have looked ahead and thought that this is what I would be doing now. I first began working on my own and working with Indiana based brands, teaching them how to sell their product to consumers, teaching them how to sell and speak about what they do to people like me, just a consumer. I created recipes for them, pathways for them to reach like retail audiences. And so I did that on my website. I did that way before the advent of social media and also in a lot of like retail settings. So I did a lot of samplings, a lot of ribbon cuttings, and a lot of face-to-face interaction with people, finding out why they made the choices for food that they did and learning really about values-based purchasing in the field with consumers. And so I spent the beginning of a lot of my food system career in that space, as a business owner. I had a staff, I had people who helped me create content, and that's what I did. I had a website. And so that was a pretty great business for me to learn the other side of retail marketing from that aspect, working with consumers. And in 2013, 2014, the state of Indiana decided to get on board with the other 49 states and create a local agriculture branding initiative like other states have. So Kentucky Proud, Michigan Made, Georgia Grown, whatever state you're in, there's probably a state funded entity that is solely responsible for promoting that state's agriculture or value added foods. And so Indiana was creating an initiative like that called Indiana Grown. So I got on board at about that time, brought my audience I had with me to Indiana Grown. And from that point in time through 2021, I was the director of all the fun things. So we promoted all agricultural products that were packaged, raised, grown, and produced in the state of Indiana. It was an absolute fabulous job. Under my umbrella with my team, we marketed and promoted and elevated farmers markets, food councils, regional food system councils that were building up at that time, but also direct to consumer messaging about how they could find local in their area, not just apple orchards, but maple syrup and how is it made and what's maple syrup season and where you can find it, and just elevating the sentiment based around local agriculture in the state. And so after we got through like the hardest parts of the pandemic and farmers markets were open and I felt like it was a good time to kind of step away, I decided to take a break and learn more about agriculture from the other side. I worked for almost 3 years for Fisher Farms, which is based in Southern Indiana. They are a sustainable agriculture family farm. So they raise beef. They also sell pork from the adjoining farm next door to them, turkey from farms in their county, maple syrup and eggs. So they are like their own little food system to get their foods from that part of southwestern Indiana all around the state, and in terms of their meat all around the country. And so my role was funded through a climate smart commodity grant through the USDA. And so my job in not only being a marketing director for Fisher Farms and learning everything, I spent a rotation doing just about every job there, which was really exciting. And I learned everything. But I also was working in marketing and educating consumers on why they should care about the beef that the Fishers were raising, and that way and manner, what that meant exactly. There were research teams on the farm every week doing core and earth and soil samples and water samples, air life cycle analysis to say how many cars that they were taking off the road by their practices of raising what they knew was carbon neutral beef. And so about the time their grant was dissolved, they were going to be able to publish showing the data from, basically calf to the chef's kitchen, the exact footprint of their beef, doing all the testing and models and data analysis. It was pretty exciting to be a part of and to see. I knew very little about sustainable agriculture whenever I started working for them. When I was with the Department of Agriculture, I had a very holistic, I hate to say Big Ten approach, but Big Ten approach to how I viewed agriculture, because I had to. My stakeholders were the Indiana taxpayers. So when I thought about pork and beef, it was all pork and all beef. When I left and started working for this family farm and learned about their 6 generations, they'd been there on that land, farming there since before the Civil War, and what they did to regenerate their land over the last 50 to 60 years specifically, it was very fascinating to me. And then speaking to chefs about why they would choose that meat, why they seek out their quality, and not just chefs in Indiana, but chefs around the Midwest, it was really eye-opening for me. And then learning how to message that to consumers. So I knew I liked the way it tastes, but how could I describe that to a consumer? So that it was, for me, like really relearning a lot of deeply held thoughts I had about agriculture. And I realized that maybe what I thought I knew or what I thought I believed was what had been told to me and not anything that I had experienced for myself. I did not grow up in a farm. I did not grow up in a rural area. I grew up in, if you're familiar with Indiana University, I grew up in Bloomington, Indiana, in town. So I was not someone who had touch points with the rural life or with farm life. So it's hard to speak about advocacy sometimes, I think, if you don't have a touch point, if you haven't been there and literally touched grass. I think that you have to really be there and spend time with someone and have those kitchen table conversations to be able to advocate on their behalf. And so that's always kind of been my approach at looking at food systems and how I do the work that I'm doing right now. Because my lovely, what I would almost call unicorn of a job with the Fishers, had to be just kind of reduced because the funding went away. I still do a lot of work with them. They're people that they're very dear to me. It's not far from my home. But I'm working now for like kind of the greater Indiana food system again with FARMWISE. And so FARMWISE was developed to be advocates for that middle of the supply chain. In Indiana, there really isn't anyone or any group that represents the farmer who isn't through a commodity organization in this state. So we were looking at ways that we could find ways we could support farmers and producers who were ready or almost ready or needed help with becoming wholesale ready and wanted to sell to schools, hospitals, universities, institutions. And so Jody Smith, who I'd known for a number of years, she was on my first Indiana Grown Commission, formed FARMWISE, and now we have 5 full-time value chain coordinators that have their different regions that they specialize in. That is their job. I mean, they have cars. This is a real profession, whereas we were kind of doing it on the side for years as just part of our jobs. This is their job. And then we have 2 statewide value chain coordinators that are embedded with state agencies, one at the Department of Agriculture and one at the Department of Education, who's our farm to school liaison. So it's for me really exciting because there are people who are dedicated to being just the general knowledge base for their regions instead of one person taking over the whole state, which is kind of what we were doing before the Indiana Grown. And so, for example, I had 2 meetings yesterday with growers to figure out how we would convene with buyers in their county, planning for spring. And this is not something that I ever really did before in my previous role with the Department of Agriculture, but now we can sit down and say, you can grow these things, and this is when you are doing it, and we are going to find buyers that will have some interest in buying from you, when it's ready. And that is just not something that I've been a part of before. And so I think it's good to be able to convene those people. Some of these people don't have access to technology. They don't have a phone in their pocket. They're not sending emails. And so we're doing those things on their behalf. We're not brokering or helping guide them to pricing, but we are helping them convene these people. And so we've had just amazing feedback so far, working with groups ranging from economic development officials to mayors to superintendents to school food service directors to university culinary teams. And so expediting what could take a farmer or producer lots of visits, lots of cold calls, months of contacts. We're expediting that by trying to convene these groups together at one time all over the state of Indiana. These are not things I thought I'd be doing before. Certainly happy to see that all of my pathways have led to this work. I don't know exactly if I were to go back in time. I don't know exactly how I could have trained myself for all of this, having not taken all these little steps along the way. So learning a lot about what consumers need and what they're looking for, especially now in this time of economic fluctuation. I had to spend some time where the consumers were. That meant, being in grocery stores or talking to parent groups or my own network about how they shop and what they're looking for, and learning about their value structure, and then spending time with chefs and buyers to see about those margins and why that matters, and helping them understand the margins on the farm side and talking about farm gate needs, and advocating on that side of the fence. And then working within state government. So when I was with Indiana Grown, I reported to the lieutenant governor. We were in the lieutenant governor's family of business. So what that afforded for me was being able to travel with her, create talking points for her. When she wanted to know about all the different places to get ice cream in Indiana, I was really quick to supply her with all of our Indiana Grown members that made ice cream, or who made fudge, or who were our maple syrup producers. I was always able to be right there to elevate our members to the forefront for her travels and her speaking and how she was moving about in state government, but also, hearing what our members need and elevating that to legislators to make sure that they knew what was going on in their own zip codes that they're representing, because a lot of times they didn't. And we were the voice for them. So that was a very big time for Indiana, a lot of movement in agriculture. I think we're at a real high point at that point in time for local food awareness. And we're kind of on what I have noticed, and what, after speaking to some farmers market vendors today, they're noticing not as quite as much enthusiasm for local foods, for markets, and for what they're doing as there was even 3, 5, and 7 years ago. So how do we recapture that? How do we reassign and remind the value of those markets, that is just one of many sales tools, but for a lot of them, that is the sales opportunity. It isn't just about getting your coffee and taking your dog and seeing your friends at the market on a Saturday. It's also where someone has to sell all their produce that day, because you can't just throw it in a freezer when you get home. So just kind of talking about what their needs were, because that helps us shape our messaging and our awareness as we go out and advocate on the behalf. So that is kind of like the high level view of what I'm doing now. I kind of like that at this stage in my career, I'm managing people out in the field. And I try not to say, well, back a long time ago, or when I was younger, this used to work for me, because really, I don't think any of that matters anymore, because I think we are in just a different time. People are thinking about a lot of different things, how much they're paying for that good now, if it has a tariff, where did it come from, where was it processed, can they afford it, how can they stretch their dollars, just a lot more stressors on the consumer now that there wasn't before. So it's just we just have to restructure and pivot. Being nimble is part of it. So I am really kind of happy to be in this season of my career, helping from the outside, not necessarily being right in the thick of it. So I haven't been keeping up on the chat questions, but I know that I've seen at least 2. Would you like for me to answer those now, or would you like for me to come back to those?
I think we maybe have time for one of the questions. I'll just take the first one from Connor that we saw. They're inquiring about how does FARMWISE Indiana's programming differ from, or is it similar to that of, say, Purdue Extension?
Well, FarmWise works independently of IU. IU is just a fiscal agent for the grant. So, whereas Purdue Extension, I'm on the extension board for my county, so that is just very Purdue messaging driven, and for what their role is within their food system. So, extension educators have a particular scope of work that could be different from what we're doing, and we are not community wellness coordinators or ag and natural resource educators. We don't have that kind of background. I certainly am referring people to Purdue frequently.
Well, thank you very much. I'm so sorry that we're out of time. We always end up running a little bit short. But there are still a couple of questions in the chat. I will post a few more that we received from our end as well. So if you could answer those, maybe while others are presenting, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. And I will turn it back to Tallman to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Our second speaker is Dr. Ariel Rivers. Dr. Rivers currently serves as the Director of Membership Engagement for the National Association of Conservation Districts, based in Cool, California. Prior to NACD, Dr. Rivers served as Post-Harvest Coordinator for Latin America at the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center, CIMMYT, and as a soil conservationist with the Natural Resource Conservation Service. Dr. Rivers is extremely passionate about and effective at stakeholder engagement across the spectrum of nonprofit, research, and government agencies. Dr. Rivers holds a dual title doctorate in entomology and international agriculture and development from Pennsylvania State University. She has lived, worked, and traveled extensively in Latin America and the Pacific, but now spends her free time looking for the eggs of her free-range chickens, milking her goats, and making cheese on her small farm in the Sierra Nevada foothills of California. I'll turn it over to Dr. Rivers now.
All right, thank you so much, Sema. And thank you, Heather, for queuing up so well your journey and being able to hear from you. It's always helpful for me as a professional in the agricultural sciences as well to learn from others who have had career trajectories not so unlike my own. And so I do have some slides that I'm going to share just for the sake of having a few visuals and mostly keeping myself on task. Can you give me a thumbs up if you're seeing a slide that says conservation focused careers? All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to go through this relatively quickly. I also speak rapidly, so hopefully we will have plenty of time for questions after this brief presentation. But I just kind of want to go through a little bit of my background and what brought me to working with the conservation districts now. And then I'll give you a little bit of insight of what conservation districts do. Hopefully, in just learning a little bit from me, you'll understand that there's a wealth of organizations out there that are available to serve as partners for the work that you do, even if they don't inevitably end up being the place that you find yourself working professionally. So I will say I did start my background in an agriculturally focused region on a ranch. That is what kind of drives my values in the food systems, which I think is really important to mention in these type of discussions because my family, we suffered from water issues at our ranch, and that is kind of what forced me into a career within agriculture. And that is a problem that I'm always trying to think about and always trying to solve is how do we address conflicts between our environment and between our food systems. And that is something that I think is really, really important as we think about how we address our careers. So not all of us necessarily have this farming background, as Heather mentioned, for example, but that doesn't mean that you can't have a connection to agricultural systems. And I think having that connection is so important, especially because all of us eat and find some way to work with our producers, farmers, consumers, et cetera. So I do want to kind of briefly touch on my early career because of my ranching background, our family's water issues. I decided to go pursue a bachelor's degree in soil and water science, took a bit of a deviation, worked in nuclear remediation from the former weapons testing. Many of you might have seen Oppenheimer a few years ago. I was basically working on some of those nuclear test sites, trying to figure out how to to fix some of those issues, legacy issues from that weapons testing. That basically made me realize how much I love food systems and how much I loved agriculture. But I think it's important to kind of mention some of these career deviations because not all of us will be on a straight pathway in our careers. Many of us will take some side steps. As Heather mentioned, what works for me is going to be very different for other people. And sometimes you just got to embrace it and kind of just go with the flow and see where the world takes you, because inevitably you may end up in a position that could have been better than you could have planned for yourself. So then I continued my education. I have a master's degree in environmental studies. I spent a year as an AmeriCorps volunteer working on community gardens in Southern Washington. And then, as mentioned, I served as a soil conservationist with the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. So most of my career is actually very technically based in field with producers working on issues. It goes by many names: sustainability, regenerative ag, conservation ag. Generally speaking, all of these kind of concepts are very similar in that any individual working on those things, sustainability, regenerative, conservation, they're generally trying to figure out how best we can perform agriculture in the field in a way that does not further cause issues with biodiversity or soil health or water, whatever it may be. So then I conducted a PhD, as mentioned, at Penn State. I researched cover cropping systems and how those affected insect biodiversity. Had a few really amazing opportunities, one of which took me to Mexico to work at the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center, where I worked on post-harvest for a couple of years. I saw someone mention in the chat that they were interested in food waste and recovery. This is essentially what I was doing in this research, was trying to understand how to mitigate issues around storage for very smallholder farmers in Latin America. Then I spent a year working on insects again, what was called the Global Locust Initiative, understanding how researchers related to or doing work on grasshopper and locusts as pests in agricultural systems could come together and leverage resources to continue doing research. This was another one of those positions that prepared me really well in terms of bringing people together, serving as a convener, much like Heather has mentioned. Being a convener in these spaces is really helpful in a lot of cases. But again, super focused on something that was not agriculture. So I had to get back to my love of agriculture, where I started working with the National Association of Conservation Districts. Okay, so we're going to take a couple minutes here to learn about conservation districts. NACD, the organization that I work for specifically, we have a specific mission. It's a nonprofit, but we serve as a membership organization to support conservation districts. So we have one mission, but we support nationwide 3,000 organizations that have their own separate mission. So it can get a little confusing because I work for a membership association, but I'm going to share information specifically about some jobs and the work of conservation districts separately. What we do is essentially support those conservation districts. And again, I'll go into a little bit more detail about them in a second. Through advocacy, we do a lot of farm bill work, working with USDA to make sure there's funding available for various sustainability programs. For example, we do a lot of education and outreach. Heather mentioned the marketing around farmers markets, for example. We spend a lot of time just promoting local food systems and, again, conservation agriculture, regenerative agriculture, that kind of thing. And we put on a lot of events. So my job is one thing related to basically supporting our membership. I barely do any science anymore, but I still am supporting those scientists that actually work at conservation districts. So now we'll actually talk about the conservation districts. There are about 2,900 nationwide. There's one in almost every single county. They've been around for 80 years. They were formed in response to the Dust Bowl. Most of them were, as a means to think about, how are we going to address this major environmental crisis that's happening now, being the Dust Bowl. And luckily, while that did affect certain parts of the country, other districts were picked up in parts of the country as well, where perhaps that wasn't an issue. For example, there's conservation districts in Guam and Hawaii as well. So Dust Bowl didn't affect us there, but it was an important enough issue that conservation districts were also formed there. They're meant to be a local partner to the USDA office that's often co-located with them, which is the Natural Resources Conservation Service. NRCS was originally formed as a soil conservation service, also in response to the Dust Bowl, but it is a federal agency through the USDA. So that means all of the information, the policy, everything comes out of Washington, D.C., essentially, for NRCS, whereas the conservation districts, they're locally led. They have an elected or appointed board, and they are meant to sort of be very embedded in their communities, very focused on local work, adapting whatever their partners at the federal level may be promoting or programs they may have for something that is more hyper-specific to the location that they're in. They generally promote voluntary conservation. So that's really important to note because, sometimes people think of government as something that is very regulatory. So producers, farmers, for example, if they, hear USDA is saying XYZ is a great practice, they don't want to think that they are going to be mandated into doing anything. So they have the ability to work with conservation districts, to work with NRCS, to learn about new practices, ways to adapt tillage, for example, or whatever it may be for their local system in a way that is it's not tied to anything. They're not going to be fined if they don't do the work, for example. And so conservation districts, they work on so many different topics. It's challenging to even encapsulate them in a single slide. It seems from the chat, most of you are interested in sort of the smallholder, sort of urban agriculture space or the direct consumer space. Many of the conservation districts have urban ag programs. Many work with schools for doing ag in the classroom, and they do all kinds of work related to pretty much anything within the natural resources space or ag space. And it is kind of dependent on the local office. So some offices do have different programs and may be very focused on irrigation, for example, if they're in a specific dry part of the country. Others may have more urban agriculture, again, kind of dependent on where they are. But the point is that there is one almost everywhere. So if you can think of somewhere you want to live and you potentially want to be doing technical assistance, I guarantee there's a conservation district there, or if not, you can work with one of their partners, being NRCS, or Extension was brought up as well. So they do serve sort of a similar role. The question was brought up, how do some of these organizations overlap or coordinate with Extension? Conservation districts do somewhat fill a similar role in that there are individuals that are willing to go out to farms and potentially meet with producers and discuss practices, but they are not research-based in the way that Extension might be, or they do not, for example, they're not doing regular science or have teaching programs or anything of that nature. They're very much there to provide technical assistance, do implementation work, make conservation happen on the ground. So I pulled a few example roles from conservation districts that I wanted to share with all of you, just to show the kind of work that some individuals might be able to do in real time. This is Seattle's conservation district, King Conservation District. They're currently hiring a farm conservation planner. This is somebody that would work with producers to evaluate their soils, their natural resource programs, all kinds of whatever's on the farm. They basically look at it and they develop what's called a conservation plan with the farmer to say, okay, if you want to farm XYZ, here's the way that we can do it in a specific way that it's going to help build your soil health, develop regenerative practices or regenerate that farm, mitigate water loss, build in pollinator habitat, whatever it may be, and then also find ways to help fund the adoption of those programs. So many or practices, many things for producers when they're, all of you likely know this already, but if you're thinking about changing your practices and you want to start putting in cover crops, there's a cost that comes with that. It's either more labor or new seed or different equipment, whatever it may be. And so farm planners like this one might help be able to find funding to offset some of those costs for producers. Here's one called a land management and conservation specialist in Colorado. So this one's a little bit more focused, if I remember correctly, on native seeds and trees. So a little bit more in the natural sciences, but just another example of an opportunity in Colorado. This one is in Ohio, Education and Outreach Coordinator. So I pulled this one because it also showcases the breadth of work that can happen at districts. There's often the technical work, like the past two positions we looked at. There's these type of roles that might be sharing information about, biodiversity habit or pollinator habitat or whatever it may be, working with producers on just getting information out there about food systems or how to connect with farmers markets or whatever it may be. And there's also a lot of administrative roles as well. The last one I wanted to share with all of you, this one is in Delaware. I thought this one was particularly interesting because I've never seen one like this before. Environmental specialist, but the primary job is conducting waste audits and essentially determining if bag policies work, like at grocery stores for people to bring in their own bags rather than using the store's bags. So it just plastic carryout bag ban laws. It just shows again, the breadth of work and sort of the overlap between the natural sciences, the sort of how we address waste, how we think about the natural environment within the food systems that we're all interacting with as well. So with that, a few things. I do a lot of career talks, and I do like to, I've mentioned a few of my sort of soapbox pieces about being flexible in your career already and being prepared to take the deviations where needed. But I want to say as well that it's really helpful to push yourself outside of your comfort zone. I've definitely had a lot of jobs that I was not prepared for. I was not trained to be a post-harvest scientist, for example, but you figure it out. You gain the skills in real time. You just go in with an open mind. You lean on your network and look for support where you can get it and rely on good communication skills as well. All right, so that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Rivers. I think we have time for one question. So for that question, as someone who has regional, national, international roles or has had those roles in the past, what are the skill sets that you have found to be most useful to help you to navigate these different roles or carry on into your current role?
Yeah, for me personally, so I mentioned a few of them on that last slide. Being flexible is so incredibly important, in my opinion, and just being willing to admit when you don't know something so that you can learn it and you can move forward in a way that's helpful and productive, because there's definitely so many circumstances that I have not been prepared at all to do the work. And part of the reason that I have really enjoyed my career is because I think having an open mind has allowed me to go to so many different places and experience so much and meet so many wonderful people. But I think that really has come with a sort of approach that is not rigid. I never had any specific mindset of what I wanted to be when I grew up. I just kind of went with the direction that my career has taken me, and that's worked out really well for me. And I think that if somebody were to want to pursue different opportunities or maybe explore new areas, I think it just takes a willingness to have fun and just go into it with an open mind.
All right, well, thank you very much for taking the time tonight to share with us your experiences and some advice for future food systems professionals. And I will turn it back to Sema.
Thank you, Jeff. Our third speaker for the night is Thomas Smith. Thomas Smith has been with the Kansas City Food Hub for a little over 2 years at this point, where he currently serves as the Chief Business Officer. He received a Bachelor's of Science in Computer Science and Economics from Bridgewater State University. Thomas is originally from the Boston region, where he served as the Director of Operations for the Concerned Citizens of Randolph, Boston area nonprofit where he built a grassroots food access program that saw 3 weekly free grocery distributions in multiple suburbs and weekly hot meal programs within the city, while managing a vast network of local churches and volunteer organizations to achieve each program. Thomas has continued his work surrounding food systems in Kansas City with a focus on building that ever important community connection to local agriculture. I will turn it over to Thomas now.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, folks. Unlike the other co-presenters, this is actually my first career talk. I've given a lot of talks about food systems and the work I've been doing, but I'm very happy to be here and talking a little bit about, my path to my current career. I'm relatively young. I'm just 26, and I graduated my undergrad degree in 2022, and so really recent. But I started young, and so. But before I go into that, I'll start with what I'm doing right now. And so the Kansas City Food Hub is a farmer-owned co-op, and we're basically, if you know what a food hub is, we're basically just a wholesale aggregator, distributor, and marketer for about 42 farms across the greater metro of Kansas City. We're about 10 years old, but we've really come into our own over the last few years. And so I was able to first be hired as an operations manager and then promoted to director of operations, and now I've been retitled to chief business officer and really been able to steward the organization. And we've been able to grow pretty exponentially, where not only have we been engaging more farmers and using more farmers to sell their local produce to the community at a fair rate for those farmers, but also an affordable rate for the community members so that we can get the whole community fresh rather than just, farmers markets that sometimes are inaccessible to some of our community members, or high-end restaurants that are oftentimes inaccessible to a lot of our community members. And so what we do is try to get it not only into farm to school, but farm to food assistance or farm to food pantry, food as medicine work, grocers, and all the like. And so in the last 2 years, I've been able to grow the organization to just for focus on farm to school. I happen to actually be at the National Farm to School Conference here in New Mexico today. So if anyone in the chat is here with me, let me know. And I'd definitely love to get in touch with you while we're here in New Mexico. But yeah, we've been able to grow from just 6 school districts that we were providing local food for to 35 in the last 2 years. And so we have a pretty bigger breadth of, use of local food procurement in the greater metro. And that just means our kids are receiving healthier, more nutrient dense and tasty food. So, just for instance, one of our suburban school districts has seen a 40% increase in salad bar usage when they're using our local lettuce versus a national broadliner provider of lettuce. And so very happy to be continuing that work, but a little bit more about the kind of the process that got me there is that, I grew up in Boston. I was actually, the reason that I came to Kansas City was that I was dating my, now wife, who was at Boston University. And as luck would have it, she's actually from Kansas City. And so that's what brought me over there. And so it wasn't a career move. I wasn't hired by the food hub or anything. I just kind of moved for my life and then found a wonderful opportunity, which, I've been able to find is, if you are willing to put in the work and also, have type of ingenuity and, a lot of different skills and qualities, you can usually find good work anywhere. There's always people trying to change their community, and you just have to find those people and engage with them. And, not only it's not always the best paying role at the beginning, but you can definitely keep building with them, and hopefully that will, materialize into something better. But yeah, so I moved to Kansas City with my wife, who's from Gladstone, Missouri. That's what brought me to that kind of career path. But the reason why I was doing more local food is that and I really wanted to engage with the farmers, was because in Boston, I was running while I was in my undergrad, I saw the immense need from COVID. And, I was connected to a few city councilors because of my work with the Young Democrats of America, as well as a little bit of election work that I was doing. And they had a nonprofit that they basically gave me the keys to the castle because they just, had a belief in me. And I was able to transform kind of a constituent services nonprofit, hence the name Concerned Citizens of Randolph, into an entire region of Massachusetts being covered by it to help food insecurity during the time of COVID. And so basically, I was able to identify, resources that I had where I was still in my undergrad at Bridgewater State, which is the largest state school that's not part of the UMass system in Massachusetts, and I was able to grab a lot of volunteers and then identify places that were doing food access work who needed a lot more volunteers during COVID, and connect those two thoughts, and then that basically allowed me to build a whole network of food pantries in churches that had aging populations that needed the help all across the South Shore, that we could then get them more energized and ready for the immense need from COVID-19. So I built it from just one pantry to ended up being a pantry network of 5 pantries spread out over South Shore that had changing off weekly distributions, as well as a lot of hot meal distributions in Boston. And it was just kind of always being engaged in the community and connecting with anyone who is wanting to know about the work and seeing where that would go. And, sometimes leads go nowhere. And sometimes, you waste a little bit of time in an in-person meeting or an email thread. But at the end of the day, that's where you get the best connections. And just being able to really grow from that. Before then, I wasn't really, with that work, I was getting a lot of stuff from the Feeding America Food Bank, Greater Boston Food Bank, and saw firsthand how, we would get entire pallets of bananas, let's say, that are not grown anywhere near Massachusetts. As you might know, Massachusetts can't grow bananas. And they were already over ripened, and we would have to take them off the truck and throw them away. And we didn't even have a compost set up. And so we were literally just throwing them into the trash. And that made me really think about how much food is being destroyed and how this, larger national system is really failing us in a lot of ways. And so when I moved to Kansas City, I really wanted to get engaged with that type of more local agriculture scene. And now I've been able to build out a lot of pantry programs that are using local farms, creating that economic development, but also getting better produce that's not going to go to waste so quickly for our pantries. Before I was doing that in my undergrad, I had the luck of being a National Science Foundation Fellow, which was the first NSF grant for my state school. And that brought me over into Eastern Europe to do archaeological work. And so my entire degree was around computer science and economics. And I got to see firsthand over in Eastern Europe and former Republic of Georgia, helping with technical analysis and developing machine learning algorithms to help this archaeological dig. And it really, all throughout high school, all throughout middle school, all throughout everything, I really always saw myself in the computer science world and more in that, technical science world in general. And from that experience and from a few other internships in my undergrad, as you can imagine, I don't do much as chief business officer with a degree in computer science for a food hub. But from those experiences in undergrad, I really found that it wasn't my calling. And I knew that even though it wasn't my calling, I can develop work experience through the nonprofit, through political organizing, through all these other things that won't make it so that my degree is completely worthless with a computer science degree trying to do food systems work. And so, that's kind of definitely my through point. Even in high school, I was doing a lot of work with, I formed my own nonprofit to try to serve my community that was doing supplemental after school programs for elementary schools in my hometown. And so just, always the through line has been helping my community and serving those around me. And when you have that kind of through line, and that doesn't have to be serving those around you. I know that sounds mighty noble, but it really isn't, because you can have a lot of different noble opportunities of being curious about the world and seeing science as that kind of point to do that. Helping with the environment. There's so many different causes that you can have and have that as a through point for all of your career work, and just making sure that that's like a guiding light for what you do. And I definitely think that that's a guiding light, and what I always find in any job I'm trying to apply for. And that's what really always gets me energized and engaged, far more than if I, going back to computer science, was going and working to build the next algorithm for Amazon. But yeah, I think we're a little bit beyond time. And so let me know if I can get a question, or we can go on to the last bit of the program.
So, well, you're right on time. So we have actually plenty of time for a couple of questions here.
Awesome.
First one that I have is, do you see a future where food hubs end up working hand in hand with value-added food processors? I was looking on your website last night, and it looked like you were working with chefs, with schools, with supermarkets. But what about food processors?
Yeah, so funnily enough, it's almost like I emailed you to ask this question. We are actually launching our minimal processing center in partnership with funnily enough, again, just always interesting connections you find in the work, a library that has a commissary kitchen that's also a test kitchen and a learning kitchen. We've been able to work with them to get some grants that then bought additional equipment. And then because of that, grant writing process that we helped them with and all the letters of commitment we were able to provide. They actually, when they got the equipment, are giving us a free lease in perpetuity to be able to process local food and do frozen or even fresh 30-pound bags of diced butternut squash and diced potatoes and chopped carrots and all of that, and then potentially move that further along into something like Montana has some wonderful food hubs doing this thing called Montana Marinara, where they process local tomatoes into a marinara sauce that then can be used for schools across the state. So yeah, we're doing that work. I really see it as a main goal of a lot of food hubs, because at the end of the day, not everyone has the labor, the equipment, and the technical know-how to, and really the labor and the equipment to chop a ton of butternut squash for food service operation, but almost all of the people have a want and a desire to do that. So we need to do that middle step for them to get it ready for them so that they can include it in their operation.
All right, thank you very much. We have a question from a member of our live audience.
Yeah, wonderful.
Hi, Thomas. Just a little bit about me. My name is Summer, and I had the opposite experience of you. I'm actually from Kansas, spent a lot of time in Kansas City, and then moved up here to upstate New York. I'm at Cornell in the Manners program now. I'm also 26, so lots of connections there. Anyways, from my experience in Kansas City, I was really curious, given your organization being a cooperative and how you're reaching out throughout the community. There's a lot of pockets of disadvantaged and food desert areas in Kansas City. How are you guys specifically targeting those audiences?
Yeah, so obviously schools, where most of those families have their children attending public schools in the region, and they can eat the healthy local produce. If we look at it nationally, schools are the biggest restaurant chain in the entire country. And so trying to get into all schools, not just, the rich suburban schools that maybe have enough money to buy mushrooms, but aren't dealing necessarily with those communities that need more care and need more attention, and making sure we're dealing with all schools so we can access that community. But we're also very happy that we've been able to collaborate and build into the same space as a few different redirection partners, including Camby's Markets, which you might be familiar with from Kansas City. They're a leading nonprofit doing some groundbreaking and innovative work on healthy corner stores, where they're providing low cost produce from the national, that would otherwise go to waste, redirecting that national produce into these corner stores all across the metro. So they have 101 corner stores that they put a cooler in. And so if you don't have a grocery store within, 5-10 minutes of you, you can just go down to your gas station, your corner store, there's a lot of different places they have it in, even a cafe, and buy produce at a affordable price there. And when we first started partnering with them, they were only doing national produce, stuff being grown all over the world, to be honest. And we said to them, why don't we make it work for local? And I'm happy that over the last year, we've been able to get local farm eggs into all of these corner stores so that anyone in the metro can go to, 101 different locations and get, local farm fresh eggs at any time of the day in these mostly 24 hours, 7 days a week, little corner stores that almost always have SNAP acceptance as well. And we also have been able to do the same thing with apples, local apples. And so we're really trying to make it so that we're helping the whole community, keeping the whole community fresh. Thank you for the question.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your experience and also to answer some of our questions tonight. And with that, we always, the season was a little bit longer, and but we want to extend such a huge thank you once again to all of our guest speakers for sharing their experiences so generously with us during this 4th episode of our season. The speakers' contact information shown here will be included along with the recording and an email sent to you, so please keep an eye out for that. And I will turn it over to Sema, who has some free memberships to give away.
Thank you for that information, Jeffrey. So to close, we'd like to surprise participants who attended this live session of Finding Your Future in Food Systems with a complimentary NAFSN membership. Congratulations to Ella Agus, I apologize if I mispronounce your last name, of New York, and Lisa Hoffman of Louisiana for being randomly selected from among 170 registrants to receive a NAFSN annual membership this week. You will also receive a second membership to give to a person of your choice.
And thank you for joining us tonight. This is the 4th and final episode of our 9th season. Special shout out and thank you again to our season sponsor, FARMWISE, as well as all of our year-round sponsors. This programming would not have been possible without your continued support. We'll be taking a brief winter hiatus in the month of January, but we'll return with season 10 on February 4th. So please be on the lookout for additional information as we work to finalize our speakers for our 10th season coming soon. If you have any suggestions for any speakers or areas of the food sector that you would like us to feature, or any feedback that you may have for us, please don't hesitate to contact NAFSN leadership or myself directly. We always want to make sure that this webinar series is actually speaking to your needs. And lastly, I would like to extend a very large thank you to our collaborators at Manners Cornell for making this special watch party possible. This would not have been possible without the support of Manners chapter's members, their e-board advisors, Dr. John-Luc Yannick and Ms. Rhonda Todd, President Sema, and social media coordinator Ariana. The live watch party would also not have been possible without the support of the Student Activities Funding Commission of Cornell University. And special thank you, as always, to Natalie Cruz, Kim Hines, and Aya Ortorva, for the behind-the-scenes support for all of the Finding Your Future Food Systems episodes. And to conclude, on behalf of our entire productions team here at NAFSN, including Natalie, Kim, Vivian, Ari, Audrey, Aya, Wendy, Daniela, Durjoy, and myself, as well as our special guest co-host of this episode, Sema, we thank you for being here with us this evening, and we hope to see you again in spring 2026 for season 10. And until then, we wish you well.
You've been listening to Finding Your Future in Food Systems, produced by the North American Food Systems Network. To learn more about our professional development opportunities, visit foodsystemsnetwork.org.